For it is as if a man going on a journey summoned his slaves and entrusted his property to them. To one he gave 5 talents, to another 2, to another 1, to each according to his ability. Then he went away. The one who had received the 5 talents went off at once and traded with them, and made 5 more talents. In the same way, the one who had the 2 talents made 2 more talents. But the one who had received the 1 talent went off and dug a hole in the ground, and hid his master's money. After a long time, the master of those slaves came and settled accounts with them. Then the one who had received the 5 talents came forward, bringing 5 more talents, saying, Master, you handed over to me 5 talents. See, I have made 5 more talents. His master said to him, Well done, good and trustworthy slave. You have been trustworthy in a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Enter into the joy of your master. And the one with the 2 talents also came forward, saying, Master, you handed over to me 2 talents. See, I have made 2 more talents. His master said to him, Well done, good and trustworthy slave. You have been trustworthy in a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Enter into the joy of your master. Then the one who had received the 1 talent also came forward, saying, Master, I knew that you were a harsh man, reaping where you did not sow, and gathering where you did not scatter seed. So I was afraid, and I went and hid your talent in the ground. Here you have what is yours. But his master replied, You wicked and lazy slave! You knew, did you, that I reap where I did not sow, and gather where I did not scatter? Then you ought to have invested my money with the bankers, and on my return I would have received what was my own with interest. So take the talent from him, and give it to the one with the 10 talents. For to all those who have more will be given, and they will have an abundance. But from those who have nothing, even what they have will be taken away. As for this worthless slave, throw him into the outer darkness, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth.
This story from the Gospel of Matthew is one of those Bible stories that I bet you've heard of, even if you don't spend a whole lot of time reading the Bible. It may be so familiar to us that when we see it, our eyes just kind of glaze over and we say to ourselves, yeah, I've heard that one before. I got that message. Thank you very much. I wonder, though, are we so quick to read through this story that we miss a very important message within it? This is indeed one of Jesus' most familiar parables. And any time Jesus told a parable, you can bet that it was designed to knock somebody off of their much too comfortable theological perch. We should never think that we know God so well that God can no longer surprise us. If we become too comfortable with our image of God, we'll never grow into a deeper understanding of who God really is. And honestly, this life should be an ongoing journey of learning more and more about God. You may be wondering, with all the things we have to do in this life, why is understanding God the most important thing? Shouldn't we direct our time and energy toward living a morally upright life? Shouldn't we focus more on doing good deeds and helping others? Well, at first glance, this story seems to be teaching just that. The master praises the 2 servants who make the most profit for him. It is the one who hides the money in the ground who is chastised. Quite often in Jesus' parables, the characters represent either God or humanity. In this story, if we see the master as God and the servants as those of us who want to follow the way of God, the message that we arrive at is that God isn't happy with followers who aren't willing to take risks, who aren't willing to step out in faith and take chances that might grow God's kingdom. We could stop right there and have a good message. And honestly, most sermons I've heard on this passage do just that. The preacher encourages the congregation to take the gifts and talents God has given them and put them to use in ways that will draw more people into the kingdom. Well, that's all well and good, but if we want the message of this parable to be truly transformative, we have to look a bit deeper. We have to look at what the servants believed about their master. In Jesus' day, a talent was worth a great deal of money. 1 talent would have equaled the worth of a day laborer's wages for 15 years. Yet here is this master, entrusting his servants with 5, 2, and 1 talent accordingly. He's trusting them with huge amounts of money, trusting that they won't steal from him, trusting that they will use his money wisely and be good stewards of his property. And all of this while he's out of town and not there to look over their shoulders. Moreover, the master has doled out the money carefully and with great consideration for the abilities of each of the servants. Have you ever been entrusted with a responsibility that you knew was way beyond your skill level? Well, I have, and I can tell you that it is a terribly stress-inducing situation. I dreaded every minute that I spent working on that particular responsibility. I couldn't sleep at night. I felt like I was drowning in a sea filled with sharks. And worst of all, I felt like it would never end. Now, mind you, I put myself into that situation, but it didn't make it any less unbearable. This master, however, did not lay that kind of burden on his servants. He knew what they were each capable of, and he planned their level of responsibility accordingly. He gave them each what he knew they could handle, so that they would have the joy of experiencing that sense of success and accomplishment. So how would you describe such a master? What qualities would you attribute to him? Well, the first 2 servants joyfully and wholeheartedly joined in the exciting work of growing the master's kingdom. They took what had been entrusted to them and they did great things. That could really only have been possible if they had had a positive image of their master. They had to know that if their investment failed, the master would realize that they had done their best and would be satisfied, even with failure. They must have known their master to be a good man, a man who himself could be trusted to be fair and kind and understanding. Perhaps they had already experienced such qualities from their master when they had failed at something else in the past. So now I ask you, have you ever had an experience like that, where you failed at something and someone, perhaps a coach or a boss, encouraged you to try again? If so, what was that like for you? Years ago, I was in St. Louis for Stephen ministry training. And the hotel where the training was held and where we, the participants, were staying was absolutely top-notch. I can tell you that as I looked at the day rate for a stay in that hotel, I almost fell over. I had never stayed in such a fancy place before. Well, one day during my stay, I was walking past the check-in desk, and behind the desk were an older woman and a young man. The young man had this look on his face of just such complete distress. It was obvious that he had made some huge mistake on the job. He looked like he expected to be severely berated and perhaps even fired right there on the spot in front of everybody. Instead, the woman spoke kindly to him, assuring him that everybody makes mistakes, and that through this experience, he had actually learned a very helpful lesson. The way she handled that situation has stayed with me all these years. And I can tell you that if I ever find myself in St. Louis again and have money to burn, I will be staying in that hotel. I think that the first two servants in this parable knew their master to be the kind of man, the kind of boss that this hotel manager proved herself to be. The third servant, however, had a very different idea of what his master was like. We don't know why, but for some reason he had formed in his mind an image of the master as being cruel and untrustworthy. He allowed that image to affect how he did his work. And in so doing, he failed not only at his job, but more importantly, he failed in his relationship with his master. If we understand the master as representing God, we're led to ask ourselves, what is my image of God? Who do I believe God to be, and how do I expect God to act? I grew up with a negative, even frightening image of God. I believed that God was watching my every move, looking for my every mistake. Not to lovingly correct me, but rather to berate and condemn me. That image was planted into my head by other people who sadly had grown up being taught the same idea about who God is. I found myself caught in this strange tension. There was something inside of me that longed to be close to God. That divine spark that exists within each of us was inviting me to seek a relationship with God that would be transformative. However, the negative image that I had of God left me too afraid to accept that invitation. And honestly, who in their right mind wants to pursue a relationship with a God who is more abusive than loving? Our image of God, who we believe God to be, affects every aspect of our lives. If we believe God to be the equivalent of a moral SWAT team, we'll find ourselves hiding from God rather than pursuing God. If we expect God to be condemning of us and of others, we'll project that image to others through our words and actions. And most likely, we will become stumbling blocks that keep others away from God rather than a light that draws others to God. Now, admittedly, we might look at how the master in this parable responds to the third servant and say, well, it sounds to me like that third servant was right. The master attacked the servant and had him thrown out into the darkness where there is weeping and gnashing of teeth. Well, the thing is, if we expect God to be cruel, then we will experience God as cruel, so long as we are unwilling to let go of that negative image of God. I guess you could say we get the God we believe in. However, if we are willing to reimagine God, if we're willing to see the light of God's love and as it is offered to us through others who know God as forgiving, grace-filled, and merciful, then we will begin to experience God in that way as well. I can happily tell you that that is what happened for me. Others showed me who God really is through their own willingness to display forgiveness, mercy, and grace. We can let go of our old harmful images of God and embrace a healthier, healing image of God. And as we do so, we discover that the invitation to know God is truly a gift. And as we come to trust that God cares for us, we will let go of the fear and embrace the excitement of risking it all for God's kingdom. As we realize that God is okay with our failures and can even redeem them and use them for good, we will grow in our courage to step out in faith, to move outside of our comfort zone, and dare to love others in new and more transformative ways. This parable teaches us that God delights in allowing us to participate in the great work of redemption in this world, and that we, in turn, can delight in joining in that work. We can do so without fear, and we can do so with great joy. And in the process, we can also delight in our deepening relationship with the God of love. That's why growing in our understanding of God is the most important thing in life. Doing so makes life worth living. And without that purpose, life is simply just day-to-day drudgery. So I invite you to take a serious look at who you believe God to be. What is it that you believe about God? How do you experience God to be? Are there negative images of God that you need to get rid of because they are more hurtful than healing? How can you keep growing into a deeper, more fulfilling knowledge of God? And then you can better move into that question of how will you live out the exciting work of God, the exciting work of growing God's kingdom in this world. God has entrusted us with great spiritual wealth. Let's not let it go to waste because we have the wrong image of who God is. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.